Welcome back to our latest episode of Boots and Heels, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We are at Warner's Gin Distillery.
So we're going to have a tour of the farm, talk a little bit about diversification and maybe do some beekeeping. So yeah, I will be keeping an eye on Becca, making sure she doesn't drink too much.
That's quite tricky. But as always, if you like this video and our other ones, please subscribe and also head over to our Instagram as well if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing.
So this is the heart of the distillery, basically. The distillery was sort of established in 2012. This was the old animal hospital, and you can see the cattle gates are still on there. But predominantly it was cattle grazing on this farm, and the farmhouse is just across the way. Basically established in 2012, and basically Tom's dad gave Tom the farm. Or gave Tom the barn to say, here you go son, crack on with this crazy idea you've got. Little did he know what a monster the business would become, and so yeah, this is where it all started.
One thing, when we've walked in here already, I feel like it smells quite herby already, and I don't know whether that you'll probably be like, oh, it just smells normal, but I think it smells quite kind of like aromatic already, even just in like this bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what you're smelling. So gin is basically taking botanicals, which are plants, materials. So it could be nuts, berries, seeds, flowers, leaves that have essential oils. And it's using alcohol to take those essential oils out and create drinks. So it's crafting using plant material, basically. Yeah.
Well, it does smell nice. It does.
Yeah. I've got some actually. I did do. Where did they go? They've been moved.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? It's got that kind of like. It really does. Wow, it's strong. Like when you open a bottle of gin for the first time, and it hits you. You should know all about that. Okay, this is amazing.
Yeah, this is not to drink now, but but yeah. So when we talk about botanicals, we're talking about things like things that are rich in essential oils. So things like citrus peels. So you got some orange peel. We use orange peel, lemon peel, grapefruit peel. But in order for it to be a gin, has to be juniper forward. So juniper is the key ingredient, which is these bad boys here. So these are...
And they're dried, so do you put them in dried, or would you...
Yes, so we have juniper growing in the UK, but in terms of the best quality juniper for gin production, it tends to come across from the continent. So ours comes from Macedonia, and these effectively occur wild, and people in the season collect these under license, and they get sold into the spice trade.
Does it smell strong?
Have a go.
Right.
So if you take a few berries and squish them between your fingers, you'll see it's rich in, it's quite oily.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and give that a sniff as well. So it's quite piney.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So juniper gives like a really piney note to the gin, but in order to be a proper gin, it's got to have, there's like 3 Holy Trinity gin botanicals, so juniper, coriander, angelica root.
Right.
And once you've got that backbone of gin, you can really craft and experiment with flavour.
Yeah. One thing I think, having coriander in gin, because I feel like coriander is such a love it or hate it kind of herb in food, isn't it? And some people are like, oh, I can't eat coriander, but then as soon as it comes to gin, you don't even really, when it's all blended in together, you wouldn't know, would you?
No, and indeed you can have different types, so you can crush it, you can then have it whole, and each imparts a different type of flavour. So actually in gin, coriander is kind of a citrusy note. It's a spice citrus note, and yeah, if you've created a balanced recipe, you wouldn't go, oh, that jumps out as coriander. Yeah. Actually, the flavours sort of work together to create a really good mix.
And so perfecting the recipe, how long does that, because you can't just chuck a few bits in and hope for the best, can you? You've got to be tasting and developing and...
Correct. So Rachel, who you might meet around here, so Rachel is Rachel's our flavour innovation guru, and yeah, we basically go upstairs to the lab and we sample at a small scale, like a benchtop scale, sort of 5 litres, and basically sample different ways of capturing flavour. So we've got a process called maceration, which is a bit like infusing like a tea bag. So through the process of maceration and distillation, you can capture the essential oils bound within those ingredients. Yeah.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So this is an example of kind of what goes in the pot. So, so you can see here the juniper berries.
Yeah.
And then so the coriander seed, these small seeds here, and then angelica root, which are kind of rooty notes like that. And then from there, ours. This is an example of our Harrington Dry, one of our originals, and that has cardamom, nutmeg, elderflower, and black pepper. Cardamom and black pepper is kind of our signature on the Harrington Dry. But the way forward, which has guided our London Dry, is about how we use the farm and farm-grown botanicals to give our signature flavour. And there's actually a beautiful synergy with growing for flavour and the effect for biodiversity as well. So we'll have a look at that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a great thing when you look at gin compared to something like vodka.
Yeah.
So vodka is a distilled alcohol. So we start off with effectively a vodka, and it's made from grain, so from wheat. So you have a grain neutral spirit to begin with, and then that's a blank canvas to impart flavour onto that alcohol.
It's quite creative, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
it
it's like just trying different things. I bet.
Yeah.
It's fun in the lab.
It's well, that's why we call it craft distilling, because it is a craft. And to operate a still like this, there are so many different nuances based on the shape of the still, the speed of the still, the recipe that you put in there. It's almost like a musical instrument. So when you craft with flavour, you also craft with the still, and then you've got to taste it through the distillation to make sure things are running the way you want it to run, to give the flavour that you expect. So.
And this machine looks quite it looks a bit Doctor Who-y.
I was going to say Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Maybe that's
Willy
more
Wonka.
fitting. So, what are the elements to this as a distiller?
It's a copper pot still. So basically what it is it's a giant kettle, effectively.
Yeah.
What it does is, this is the pot, and it's surrounded by a water bath, a water jacket. So that's heated using a gas burner, and it heats the pot inside here. Inside that pot, you have alcohol. If you were to heat alcohol on its own, it would evaporate pretty quickly. So we need water to control the speed of the boil. Yeah. So we use spring water from the farm. We used to go down with the tractor and trailer. But actually, when Tom first started, it was the quad and a trailer. Then it went to tractor and trailer, and now we've actually tapped into the aquifer with a borehole, so we don't have to keep driving across an ancient scheduled monument to collect water. Yeah. So we'll go and see that in a bit. But yeah, basically we're using spring water, alcohol, and botanicals to create gin. And what happens is that heat will boil the alcohol. So water boils at 100 degrees, alcohol boils at about 75 degrees. So during the distillation, it will be somewhere between 75 and 90 degrees, depending on the start and the end of the distillation. But you can see there, it's around 90 degrees. So the alcohol is boiling, but the water's not. So you're getting a controlled boil, and the vapours are carrying all those essential oils. So the essential oils dissolve in alcohol. Right. They then boil off as a vapour. And then we have what's called reflux, which is basically periods where it condenses, evaporates, condenses and evaporates. And so you have reflux going on here, and then it goes across it's called the swan neck, and it goes into the column here. The vapours rise through the column through a series of plates. These plates have got water on them, and basically you have evaporation condensation going all the way across till it hits the cooling column, where there's a lot of copper contact, and copper is great for stripping out the nasty flavours, to then it flowing off the cooling column into the collection vessel, and that's coming off, believe it or not, at about 90% ABV. So it's quite strong gin.
Oh my goodness.
So
That is strong. You'll be passed out on the way home.
I was going to say, Becca can handle that. I can't. I'm lightweight.
yeah, I mean, so we will sample during the distillation. So literally just by dipping your finger, tasting it. Feel free to have a go if you want, but only a tiny bit because it evaporates before it.
Go on, Becca.
You'll be right.
Oh my word.
So that's really strong.
Is it strong? Just
Making
your
my
idea.
mouth tingle.
So
It
that's
tastes genuinely delicious, and I think that's one thing that you never really do, particularly with flavoured tonics and things like that, which do make a genuinely delicious combination. You would never really have just gin on its own, so sometimes you probably don't appreciate the actual gin, do you? And that is very, very nice, albeit extremely strong.
so it is concentrated. So the flavours are concentrated, the alcohol's concentrated. When you buy a bottle of gin, it's usually about 40% ABV. I mean, it can range from about 38 to about 45 within our products, 44. And each gin will have its own recipe. And then from here, you basically dial it back to bottle strength. We either use for like a London Dry gin, really pure water, so reverse osmosis water, to dial that back to bottle strength. But what we're known for is using fruit juices to cut back to bottle strength. It's a process that we've sort of pioneered as the Harrington process, because when we first started, we were in the really early days of the craft distilling movement. I've seen a boom in gin distilleries, which is great. But what we were doing, particularly with the rhubarb gin and cutting back with rhubarb juice, pioneered the way of the flavoured gin category and also the pink gin category too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it all comes off the still here. At the beginning of the distillation, you have the heads. The middle of the distillation, you get the hearts, which is the really good bit. And then at the end you get the tails. So we want to keep the hearts and get rid of the heads and the tails, and just keep the best liquid throughout the distillation. Yeah. So yeah.
Amazing.
That's fab. Has there been a lot of excavation on all of this stuff, or is it just kind of
No, it's
untouched?
Untouched. In fact, even the county archaeologist needs a license to look here.
Really?
It's protected. So yeah, it's protected as an ancient scheduled monument. So all you can do is graze these fields to protect the archaeology underneath the.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because there's often talk about, all land, we should just grow crops in it or whatever, but actually that's a perfect example of why we need livestock, because there's some areas which even if you went in with a direct drill, you're still going to absolutely, let alone ploughing that or any other kind of cultivations on it. So,
yeah, for sure. And so I think that there are incentives out there. I mean, we don't have any farm payments around historical conservation, but as the changing landscape with basic farm payments are being withdrawn, we're going to need to look at other sources of funding to be able to manage the farm to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So for us, conservation means wildlife conservation and historical conservation, because at the end of the day, we're part of the story of the farm. There are people that have been before us, there's people that are coming after us.
Yeah.
So we're custodians of the land for a certain period of time. And so we need to do the right thing in passing it on to future generations in a condition that is as good as, if not better, than when we received it.
I love that, and I think that's something we often find when we kind of visit places, is whoever's kind of got the land or been passed on, or new entrants, they always want to leave it better. They want to do better for the next generation or whoever's going to take it on. So that's great.
Yeah.
And knowing what doing the right thing is, it changes. Like the political landscape changes, and what was the right thing 30, 40 years ago isn't necessarily the right thing now. And so it's keeping up to speed with changes to make sure that we're future-proofing and achieving a place where people and wildlife can live or coexist side by side, that's profitable for business and for the wider countryside.
And I think that idea that also it's a massive priority to look after wildlife or the environment, but you can't do that unless your business is making a profit, because you can't make any investments or any kind of sacrifices on productivity or use of land if you don't have enough of a financially viable business to do that. So it's a real kind of conflict and difficult thing to do.
It's a challenge, and yeah, it's and often we can't move as fast as we want to move because it needs to be a profitable business. I mean, within sustainability, you're looking at 3 core areas of sustainability. There's environmental sustainability, there's social sustainability, there's financial sustainability as well. So, you can't do one at the expense of the other. A great saying that I connect with is no margin, no mission. Like, if you want to do the right thing, you need to make sure it's a profitable business. Otherwise, you just can't do it. Yeah, that's the great thing about Northamptonshire. It's full of sort of hidden gems when it comes to the countryside. And
I feel like this view is one of them.
Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah, so Northamptonshire is the county of squires and spires because it's got a lot of churches and a lot of private estates. So this used to be way in the days gone by. It was part of Kelmarsh Estate, and this land's been grazed for quite a number of years. But prior to that, as I was mentioning, the Knights Hospitaller used to live in the Manor house, which stood where the cattle are at the moment. And they used to sort of create or look after the general population, like from health and food, and the Knights Hospitaller were their role was to kind of look after the general population in the time when the government was the church. So in the Holy Wars, anyway, Knights Hospitaller were living in the Manor house. Growing medicinal herbs and farming fish, and so these earthworks that you see below the manor house are the old ancient fish pond, medieval fish ponds. The area to the right hand side here are the terraced gardens of the medieval manor house.
It's very like cyclical, isn't it, to kind of think that there was these kind of medicinal, botanical, and then now you're doing that here. It's very nice to kind of see how that's progressed throughout the years.
Yeah, it's kind of connecting with your heritage as well, and say recognition that you're part of the story of the land, and and recognising what's gone by to where it's going.
So in terms of the cows, obviously they've just been turned out. What sort of herd do you run? And I guess how many do you have here, and how do they kind of connect in as the farm and then a diversification as well?
Yeah, so Tom's third generation cattle farmer. Tom's dad, Ben, he's in his 80s. He still lives in the farmhouse and he manages the cattle. Tom, his son, has decided to diversify the business so that to future-proof sort of the income streams. So say 140 acres, and it's a finishing farm. So Ben will buy the livestock in the spring, and they'll go to market, and then we'll turn to sheep in the autumn and the winter, and then the cycle starts again in the spring the following year. So it's part of the family business. Senior side, the elders look after the cattle, and the younger guys look after the distillery.
Is it important, because obviously you talk then almost about the kind of seasons that you have with agriculture, so obviously that gives you peaks and troughs in terms of workload, but even, we were talking about being a viable business in terms of your cash flow and things like that. So is it important to have a diversification which is more continuous cash flow? I know alcohol kind of does have some peaks and troughs, doesn't it? But can you manage that a bit better than farming peaks and troughs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tom's the best person to answer on this one, but speaking on his behalf, it's nice to be in a position where you can dictate the rates that you're paying rather than be reliant on somebody else's governing or what rates you get for your product. So it's more you can do better forecasting and better models based on the value.
More stability.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it's important to connect to your roots, and the farming roots is key to the birth of this distillery, and actually understanding how we can continue to use the farm in different ways, and keep it at the heart of Warner's.
Yeah, because I guess without the farm you wouldn't have the buildings to think, how are we going to utilise those, and just gives you that setting which actually when you walk up the drive, it just fits really nicely, and then you think, oh gosh, how's there, you know, a whole distilling kind of machine and setup. So it's amazing to see it all tied together.
And it's also about sort of that education piece around how the outside really does go into those bottles. So, you know, when we talk about, you know, the role that the bees play, you know, they are pollinating the blackthorn in the hedgerows. I mean, they've just gone over now, but it's those blackthorns that are going to give us the sloes for the autumn. We have a sloe swap here where we get the good people of Northamptonshire to pick sloes, come back to the distillery and swap it for gin. But, you know, without those without those bees, we wouldn't have the sloes. It's the nectar that's going back into the hives that goes into our honeybee gin. You know, and then it's also valuing those hedgerows, not just for the elderflower that we pick. So we forage for our elderflowers for the elderflower gin, but you know, the role that those hedgerows play for the 5 internationally protected farmland bird species we've got here, you know, the role for cleaning that spring water. You know, hedgerows are great for improving water quality, and also for carbon sequestration as well. So you know, understanding natural capital, what we have on the farm and how it's actually supporting the business and valuing those assets is key to a sustainable future.
Yeah, everything works hand in hand, doesn't it? Absolutely everything, all the processes, all the steps, everything complements each other. I think that's brilliant.
Can I ask about your background, how you got into kind of, you know, obviously very knowledgeable on sustainability and what goes on here, but I'm sure we'll have people who watch this and think, well, who even knew you could play that role? You're at a distillery, and then you're knowing about kind of protected wildlife, and then you know a bit about archaeology. So how did you personally get into it? Yeah,
well, it's a bit of a crazy story, but yeah, I mean, I was a marine biologist prior to this. I was actually out at sea. I worked with the Environment Agency in the coastal and estuarine monitoring team. So you know, looking at water samples and counting fish and things like that. Anyway, I was beekeeping in my spare time, and my hives were just across the valley. So when Tom was looking to set up an apiary, I was contacted through the Beekeepers Association to help them set up an apiary.
So do you have a farming in background?
No.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You're like me.
No. So environmental science and marine science.
Complete, like,
it just shows what you can get into from
a different career path.
Completely. Yeah, and it's just follow your passion really. At the end of the day, what makes you happy? Like for me, you know, valuing nature makes me happy. Now, how can we protect it? But how can we change the future that business also wants to protect it and can be part of the solution? And for me, that's an exciting opportunity. How business can be part of the solution. Because it takes everywhere. It's not just governments. It's people. It's businesses. It's working towards a common goal. So
and tides are kind of turning on that. I guess probably through your career, you've seen a bit more of an attitudinal change in that. I would say personally, from a farming perspective, we've always been very good on the whole where we can protect the environment, but there's a lot more things that are kind of going on across the board that are really starting to change, as you say, from a business perspective as well, which I guess can only be a good thing as well. Yeah,
I think that, you know, a lot of these topics are incredibly complex, and people want to do the right thing, but it's understanding what the right thing is to do, and you know, it's about getting the right guidance and putting a bit of resource to look at what doing the right thing is. And to me, it's all about collaboration, because you're not going to know everything, but you rely on other people who know their bits, and it's about joining the dots. And certainly with the future of farming, you know, a collaborative approach, because doing things at a small scale is great. But you know, in order to make change, we can't be gardening in pockets. We need to be connecting in.
You need your neighbour to be doing it. Otherwise, you've got a potentially, like, not bare land, but a bare block of kind of no man's land, which then disrupts the whole kind of patchwork of it, I guess. Yeah,
I think it's trying to get everyone to work in the same direction, and I think what we'll see is hopefully more collaboration and sort of people grouping together to work towards common goals. So watch this space.